wife and I, like I said, we stood there on the Capitol, on the mall for at least 3 hours, if not 6 hours.
Wow.
And then to get the metro back to my apartment,
Oh, it took a while.
I ended up walking away from the metro, away from my apartment, because I figured that the trains coming into Capitol would be empty, so I could get a seat and then go through the Capitol. And that actually worked out pretty good.
All right. Well, I welcome everyone here today and open up the hearing for election law and municipal affairs on SB 42 and recognize our prime sponsor, Senator Jim Gray.
Well, thank you very much. My name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts out in Holton Jones and comes down to 11 lots. This bill here requires beneficiaries of a transfer on death to actually file some paperwork so that it all happens correctly. I know that there's other people on there that are the ones that asked me to file the bill, and they can speak more eloquently on the bill. It does cause a problem when we actually don't know whether the person is passed or not passed and what the provisions are, and I'm sure we'll take care of that when we get up.
All right. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right. The chair calls Jim Mashad, Town of Hudson.
Written testimony.
And forgive me, your name may be Mashad. Maybe I said it wrong.
Variety of ways that you can Senator. As it is, I'm Jim Michaud. I'm the Chief Assessor for the Town of Hudson. And I want to thank Senator Gray for introducing this bill. My written testimony goes over in some detail the issues, but so the transfer and debt deed statutes took effect July 1 of last year. There's approximately 137 of them reported currently, except for 2 counties I had trouble accessing their deed info on. But we'll have more of these transfer and debt deeds, right? So this is a lesser expensive way to transfer your property. You avoid probate, you avoid the trust attorneys, etc. But the statute, when it went into effect, provided no mechanism for a community to be notified when the beneficiary of a death deed passes away. So imagine I put in a death deed and I name my next door neighbor as the beneficiary, the transferee, and the transferor. So the community receives that, right? And the community says, all right, that's deed. The current owner is still the current owner. And at some point in the future, when I pass away, it's going to go to this other person. So the community logs it in, but we don't know when someone passes away, right? So we don't have access to final records from the Secretary of State's office. And this seemed to be a better way for a municipality to get knowledge of when the person passes away, so that then we can reflect the current owner, the transferee, the beneficiary. Obviously, at the local level, having accurate ownership is important for tax billing reasons, for water and sewer utility billing reasons, for land use and abutter reasons, right? So if we're sending it to the person that passed away, they're not going to get it, and then the person that actually owns it, they're not going to be aware of something going on, land use notification next to them. Also, as far as the transferee passing away, they might have a veterans credit, early exemption, etc. If we don't know that they passed away, then that property continues to receive that exemption or credit, which they're not qualified for. So, one would hope that the beneficiary would let us know, but there's nothing in law that requires them to let us know. So I call this a technical fix. We spoke with the county registrars of deeds beforehand, and HMA set up a conversation, and we came to this substantially to this wording, and I believe they will follow me in support of it. I believe NHMA is also in support of it, and other assessors are in support of it, but we don't, as an association, we don't typically log in an opinion on legislation. And I also want to specify that the selectmen for Hudson have not weighed in on a position on this. If they did, I'm sure that they would support my thrust on this. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Actually, I have
Yes, Senator Long.
one. Thank you, Madam Chair. So each beneficiary of the transfer on death deed, what if there's multiple, what if they're transferring two properties? Is this singular for each transfer?
I've not, thank you for the question. I've not seen.
There you go.
That would be better. Thank you. I've not seen a deed, transfer and death deed that processed more than one property.
Okay.
I suppose it's possible. I think people would say it's probably not good form to do that, to have them individually. But if they transfer two properties, then the beneficiary would record a death affidavit saying that these, they reference the original death deed.
Right.
And original death deed reference two, then it would apply to two
Okay.
or more.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a question as well. Why not just require the beneficiary or the grantee to transmit a copy of the deed directly to the cities and towns? Why add the separate affidavit?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So we received the original deed, but we don't know when that deed is really going to become effective because we're not notified when that person passes away. There's no mechanism.
I see.
As it exists today,
I see.
we just don't know. And person passes away out of state, the town clerk doesn't know either, and the city clerk, and they're not allowed to give us that information either through their agreements with the Vital Records with Secretary of State's office. I'm sure there are clerks that participate in some sharing of information, but by and large, they're not really allowed to provide us that information. And it doesn't apply when somebody passes out of state. So,
I figured you had put some thought into that question. Thank you. All right. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you.
All right. The chair calls Kate Horgan, representing the Association of Counties.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kate Horgan, New Hampshire Association of Counties. I am pinch hitting for Register Berube this morning, head of the Register of Deeds affiliate. We did work over the summer with NHMA on this language. The Registers of Deeds fully support it and would hope that the committee would move forward with the bill.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank
Seeing
you.
None. Thank you, Kate. Chair calls. Oh, I think that might be it. NHMA has signed in supporting the legislation but doesn't wish to speak. Anyone else that wishes to speak that hasn't signed up? Okay, with that, we close the hearing on SB 42.
We'll open the next hearing in just a couple of minutes. The deed.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chair, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, District 12, and I am the prime sponsor of SB 44. Very simple little bill, and I hope you like it. So this bill basically requires a hand recount on the request of 100 registered voters in one city, town, or municipality that uses electronic bill counting machines. And this was brought to my attention from some of my constituents that are here to testify, but they just want to make sure that the numbers add up. And so I'm happy to bring this bill in for my constituents and take any questions if you like.
Questions from committee members? Did you want to speak to the, whether history tells us that a hand recount or a hand count, and a machine count are more accurate?
Well, I can only tell you from personal experience. There was one year where a hand count was requested on behalf of my opponent, and at that time, I gained 52 votes. And my opponent gained 52 votes. It's 104 the way I look at it. Never has been done in history before. And that actually happened on a recount, which the machines did not capture. So that is a fact. And that happened to, and so based upon that, and I'm sure machines are accurate, but I think everybody, wants to make sure that they feel like they're part of the process. And if as you can see in this particular bill, there's a requirement of 100 signatures in order for that to take place in a town. So, but I thought that was rather interesting. And there have been many cases. I think it was Senator French who won by 13 votes on a recount, and a representative, and now Senator Victoria Sullivan, she won. And there was a state rep vote on a recount, and she won by 1 vote on a particular recount. So I think if people want that ability to just double check, it's not a bad idea. So.
Okay. Any additional questions? Senator Moon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your statement, you mentioned of the same municipality. However, this doesn't say, it says a request of 100 or more voters who voted in that election.
In that, say like the town of Hollis, if the town wants it for that specific town, or if there's a particular an award.
Okay. So that election references the municipality.
Yes.
Okay. And that was my other question, if I may follow up. So in Manchester with 12 wards, can there be 100 people from the city of Manchester that request a hand count on the city?
So I thought about that because it's a lot bigger, right? And if I'm amenable to if it's say over 10,000 voters or in a particular area, that maybe you can bump it up to 200 or something to that effect as far as requests. That's up to you folks, but I'm amenable to that if needed. But like 10,000 and under, 100, and if it's over, then maybe a higher amount of individuals.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions, not necessarily that you'll be able to answer them, but other people who come up should be addressed. Certainly the period for that recount is 15 days. Right now, we're dealing with the Friday after the polls close. So the period of time, that would seem to be a problem, especially if it were a primary and we need to get the Ukava ballot out to declare a voter. So that would cause me a great problem. With something else, I probably remembered it to go on here. Doesn't talk about right now currently, depending upon the percentage of difference between the votes, there's varying fees, and this would have the Secretary of State, you know, even if it's 99% to one, that the Secretary of State would have to do it. And if they wanted the whole ballot counted, that would certainly cause any problem, you know, in recognizing, you know, the cost of that. So, you want to comment on either of those?
Well, I think if they had the signatures even prior to the actual date, if that helps with the time frame. And also, I thought I had put in that the municipalities would pay for the cost. Is that what you're concerned with?
Just, you know, trying to answer your question. If this is a state election, then municipalities would not be the ones who would have the ability or, you know, to recount, but I'm sure somebody else will take care of that. If it's municipal election, then certainly the rules are different, but I would imagine that the section that you put this in talks to state elections. But,
Yeah.
so, again, it would seem to me that even if we did this, that it would need modification. Any other questions from the committee? Any other testimonies that we saw there?
No, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dave Nelson. I'm the Derry Town Moderator. I have some questions regarding the applicability of this proposed legislation. The chair indicated that this was in a section of the law that only applied to state elections. I'd like to clarify that because if it applies to municipal or school district elections, and then the notice to request the recount would not necessarily go to the Secretary of State, would go to the town clerk or school district clerk. Is that something that requires clarification here, or is it implicit from the larger context of the?
And I would go back to the statute, but I believe the section that this put into would actually be state elections, not for municipal elections. So you need to look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also echo the chair's question about the deadline as it applies to primary elections and the preparation of ballots and transmitting UOCAVA ballots. So I think perhaps some modification may be required on the deadline.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Questions from the senators? No. Mr. Scanlon, did you want to testify now or at the end?
I'll testify now, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and with me is Aaron Hennessy, Deputy Secretary of State. And we're appearing today in opposition to Senate Bill 44. The cities and towns are granted the authority of determining whether or not they want to use a ballot counting device in their elections. The town can, even a large town, can say, we don't want to use the device. And if that's the decision, then they would hand count all of their ballots. The law does say that when a town decides to use a ballot counting device, that's the method that shall be used to count the ballots in an election. This proposed piece of legislation would require that cities and towns conduct a recount of I'm viewing this from the state standpoint, state or federal election, upon the signatures of 100 and more registered voters in that town or city. That's problematic. The authority of the state grants the Secretary of State as the only individual that can conduct recounts in the state. This bill would give that authority to cities and towns, in addition to the Secretary of State. The bill does not contain any standards for that process. When the Secretary of State conducts a recount, there are uniform procedures in a very controlled environment so that every recount that is conducted under the same conditions as the one before. There is no such guarantee or standard in this bill. The Secretary of State uses trained individuals to count the ballots during a recount. There is no standard of that in this piece of legislation. And I can tell you that it would be a significant effort by cities and towns, especially the larger ones, to get the trained individuals needed to fulfill that role. I think that this is not a good idea, and that if there is a need for a recount, there is plenty of opportunity to request one from the Secretary of State. In the case of primary elections and general elections, there is a tight time frame within which the Secretary has to conduct recounts that are requested so that the ballots can be prepared for the next election, or so that the winners of the election can be called to show up on Organization Day and take the oath of office. This process could interfere with that and could also affect the integrity of the ballots that would be recounted if there was a dual request by the city or town, by the voters in the city or town, or a candidate who was running on the ballot. So for those reasons, I would oppose this piece of legislation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from senators? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Very much. All right. Linda Bundy.
Good morning, Chairman Gray and members of Senate Election Law and Municipal Affairs. My name is Linda Bundy. I live in Antrim. I oppose SB 44 relative to hand counts of ballots in elections. This bill would cause confusion and delays in reporting the vote. Current law already spells out specific recount procedures depending on the type of election in RSA's 660:1 through RSA's 660:17C. Unlike current law, there is no provision in SB 44 for the percent difference between the number of votes cast for individual candidates, giving 100 voters the ability to call for a recount with few guidelines or restrictions. The bill does not assign responsibility for payment of fees for the recount. It will place undue burden on election officials and likely make it more difficult to recruit election volunteers. Since procedures already exist for requesting recounts, and this bill will add delay, work, and expense to elections, I ask that you vote inexpedient to legislate on SB 44. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The standees, if there's a chair available, you need to find a chair. Often don't allow standees anyway, so. Okay. Questions for Ms. Bundy? No? All right, moving right along. Olivia?
Good morning. For the record, my name is Olivia Zink. I'm a voter in Franklin and the Executive Director for Open Democracy and Nonpartisan Nonprofit. We oppose Senate Bill 44 for the following reasons. One, the candidate should be the only one to request a recount, which is what our current law says under RSA 660. The current law says the recount must be submitted no later than the Friday after the election, but this would give 15 days. I have concerns about the 15 days, extending that, because I think that it messes with a lot of different things, certification, getting ballots ready for the next election in a primary. Also would love further clarification on lines 4 and 5, where it says registered voter of that election. I could read that to say that it could be 100 registered voter in any election. That should, if the prime sponsor wants that to be registered voter of that town, then that language needs to be clarified. I don't believe this is ready for prime time. We've already talked about the volunteers needed to conduct recounts and the procedure, so I'll skip that part of my testimony. But this is putting it in RSA 650-242. The way I read that statute is that's the Ballot Law Commission's rules on approving electronic ballot counting devices. I don't think you want to insert this into the Ballot Law Commission's rules. I think you want to insert this into recount procedures of 660 if you're going to add a provision like this. The other concern I have is the delay of voters knowing the outcome of elections, because I think if voters had to wait more than 15 days to know the outcomes of the election, there could be concerns to our integrity. I also have testimony from Autumn in our staff. She was going to be here today but was sick, so you got me instead of her. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. We've had a couple of people opposed. We've got one more person in support. So we'll go to Al, and you're going to have to, it looks like FUL something.
Good morning, Senator and Senators. Thank you for taking the time. Name is Al Fulcino, Hollis, New Hampshire. The bill, as I originally submitted it, has been tweaked by some individuals sort of that were in the process. So there are some things that I will say up front I'm agreeable to in terms of like that 15 days. I did not originally put that in there. So there are some things that we could certainly discuss, and the wiser heads in your committee and in the House and Senate and Governor would make adjustments. Having said that, I noted Mr. Scanlon mentioned the issue of educating hand counters, and I'm a firm believer that New Hampshire has a lot of smart people, but if we feel we don't have enough hand counters, we could go to Germany, where they have 600,000 that count the national elections, France, Argentina, and we could go on. So I really think that that's a myth about educating counters. I've been a counter. It takes a few seconds to learn the process. We do it accurately. I've witnessed hand counting. I've witnessed it being off. I've witnessed my town manager, moderators make a statement that as long as it's close. And I pointed out, but this is a district election. If we're close here, the next town is close, the next town is close, and we're not going with the right numbers, then we can drastically affect a district election. Having said that, to me, the reason for this bill was nothing about those logistics. It was about transparency. What we have surrendered, and we know in this state right here, that coding for our machines was partly outsourced to a foreign country. This is a news story. It's not a story I created. My point is this. None of us ever want to surrender any type of control outside of our own. We love our machines in terms of speed and accuracy. That doesn't mean there can never be a problem. Why should we ever surrender the ability, once in a while, to say, hey, look, let's do a count? Since I've witnessed hand counts be off by significant numbers, and to hear a town moderator say, as long as it's close and as long as it didn't change the election in our town, that's problematic. I believe and I'm confident that we in this state can make the right decisions to keep authority over our elections. I don't know if you know this or not, if you are a machine count town and you want to, just for the fun of it, at your own expense, do a hand count just to dispel any myths, you are forbidden. Why would we ever want to forbid the ability to just double check what the machine did? Not even to say, let's not use the machine. Not even to say, let's doubt the machine. But you are forbidden. We ran this right up the flagpole from our community up to the Secretary of State's office. There is room for mistakes because we're all human. We've watched this state in the last 5 years clean up 250,000 names off our voter rolls in a population of 1.4 million. And then a year or two later, we submit the whole residential mailing list issue, where in Hollis alone.
We need to stay on the topic of this.
Okay, well, my point is, what I'm trying to clarify, because I heard let's talk about educating counters and all this. That all can be worked out. We're way smarter than we give ourselves credit for. So there's precedent around the world to make sure that things can be done right. We are forbidden to check on what's going on with the machines, with the exception of one candidate saying, I want to recount my race. I get it. But there's room for improvement and room for trust and respect for the sanctity of the election system. And that's what this bill seeks to address. The logistics, I know it all can be worked out, but we need full transparency. And right now, we defer to the operators of the machine, and we're forbidden from checking the math that they do. So, any questions, I'd be happy to
Questions
respond
from the
anyway.
senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Liz Tinderelli.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Liz Tentarelli, President of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire, and I'm a resident and voter in the big city of Manchester now. I'm here to oppose this bill. My written testimony includes some of the same reasons that have been given, but I would like to challenge the two things, and one is that this allows any group of election deniers to usurp an election. I have no trouble with candidates requesting recounts, but for someone who says, I just don't like that result, let's delay the official publication of the results until we do a hand count. Now, we had the Secretary of State's Special Committee on Voter Integrity, and I hope I got that name right, that listened to experts, it listened to voters, it spent months getting testimony on the election, the counts, the machine problems, the hand counts, and they decided that they didn't want to do more than the audits that we do, the randomized audits, which have come very close to the ballot counting machines. I think we should do an audit of a hand count town as well, and I don't know that we have done that, but I think that would be interesting to use the audit machine to do that. Sorry, that I'm talking about some other bill that doesn't exist, excuse me. But we know that voters make mistakes. We know that that idea of filling in an oval, putting an X over it because you've changed your mind, filling in another oval, that the machine considers that an overvote, a hand count, looks to the intent of the voter. We know that happens. That is not reason enough to delay the results of the election, to empower election deniers to create more doubt by saying, we're just going to recount all the ballots here. And unless it says that these are 100 voters from a ward in a particular town, I think you got a real problem here of a roving band of election deniers trying to usurp
We need
things.
to stop the election denier stuff. We want to talk about facts, okay? And
Well, okay, sorry, thank you, Senator, I take your criticism. I have included in my written testimony an article from October 8th of last year from the AP article that talks about studies of the accuracy of hand counts, and I will let you read that on your own. So my apologies again for getting off on a tangent. I'll be glad to take any questions if there are any.
questions from the committee? Senator?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ms. Tintorelli, for being here. Would you like to speak at all to the studies that talk about the accuracy of hand count versus machine count?
Yes, there are a number of those studies, one of which was done by a professor at Harvard, and Sola Beher, sorry, don't know how to pronounce his name, that found that hand count ballots were off by 8%. The error rate for machine counting runs about 0.5%. If you think about the situation of hand counts, the stress, the turmoil, the confusion in the room, no wonder there are errors in hand counting. And the machine just feeds those things through. There was a study in Nevada, a full hand count of midterm votes, and they matched the results. There was a discrepancy of nearly 25% between the hand and machine count, and they attributed that to hand counting error, not to machine error. So there are a couple of other references in this article, and thank you for that question, Senator.
Additional questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dan Healy is the last one I have signed up on the sheet.
Good morning. Dan Healy, Nashua City Clerk. I had signed up as the city clerk, but I was given permission to speak on behalf of the association, the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association. Many of the points that I was going to make have already been brought up. The recount deadline, extending it 15 days, feel is too long of a time frame given the UOCAVA ballots and different materials that need to go out and getting the results out to the public. Again, when there's a local recount request, that recount comes to us. It doesn't go to the Secretary of State, and vice versa. For a state and federal election, they would go to the Secretary of State and not the town. So we just kind of wanted to make those points. I do agree that the language probably needs to be clarified on the 100 voters, registered voters who voted in that election, specifying in that ward or, that municipality would be a good change. And then just on our memory cards and the accuracy of the election, I hand deliver our memory cards to our vendor in Salem. They're programmed in Salem, and then they are returned to us in Nashua. So with that, I'd be open to any questions.
I don't remember the memory cards being in this one. I think you're on a different bill.
Oh, it was just a point brought up that memory cards, that they're programmed elsewhere, outsourced. So on the accuracy of the election results.
This doesn't deal with the memory cards.
Okay.
Okay, questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else that didn't sign up that wishes to speak at this time? Seeing none, there is 3 people who signed up opposed, did not wish to speak on the sheets, and online there was 50 opposed and 3 in support. Okay, and with that, we'll close the hearing and we'll open the next hearing in just a minute. Thank you. Yeah. They look it up for me. Usually, sometimes they actually print out the sheets of who signed up. Okay. That's. Yeah, why don't you just forward a couple of copies to Senator Long so he can see what they look like? All right, as soon as you're ready. Okay, we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 46, and in lieu of the prime sponsor.
As you can see, I'm not Senator Ward. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Tricia Malillo, Majority Caucus Director for the Senate. And I'm here to introduce SB 46 for Senator Ruth Ward. This bill was filed on behalf of her constituent, and it would allow municipalities to permit land affected by new construction or reconstruction to be eligible for current use valuation only after a no-cut vegetated buffer is established and maintained. The constituent is here to answer any questions the committee may have. In addition, there are other members of DRA, DES who are here to testify. But
Questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I don't know if you're able to answer this question, but I guess when land is sort of brought into current use, obviously a change of use occurs, you know, when the assessor kind of usually assesses it, but normally I think on January 1st. So what is this essentially trying to get at? A different buffer than would be established pursuant to permitting or wetland buffers?
I believe so. It's a separate one, but the people behind me probably can answer that better.
Okay.
But I will ask Senator Ward as well.
Okay. All right.
Get
Thank
that to
you.
Welcome.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I believe that Al has left the room. He did not indicate whether he's speaking or not, so we'll assume no. Tanya? You're the next on the list. Who wants to speak?
Thank you, senators. This is the first time I've done this, so forgive me if
We don't
you
yell
don't
at you,
bite. Okay, good.
unless you're real bad.
No, I hope not. So again, thank you, and I thank our senator, my senator Ruth, for doing this for me. I did ask her to submit a request to maybe amend the exceptions in the current use statute to include the shoreland. How it got written into this bill is a little bit different than what I had in mind, so this might answer your question. So what I asked for was that the land in the 250-foot shoreland buffer that has been maintained in full compliance of the Shoreline Protection Act to be eligible for current use. Currently, I'm just going to read this, is that okay? So the rationale behind this was that the shoreland property historically was used to support summer cottages and other structures that were built on posts. Structures of this type have very little deleterious impact on the surface, subsurface, and deeper groundwater flows. The value of the shoreland maintained in its natural state is not limited to its function to mitigate the effects of pollutants carried by groundwater. Undeveloped shoreland imposes few, if any, cost on local government, and therefore its preservation is an economic benefit to the citizens of New Hampshire. The means for encouraging preservation of the protected shoreland, which is 250 feet from the reference line, known as the buffer zone, proposed to be authorized by Chapter 75(1), 79B, 79G, and 483B 1 and 2, is the assessment of land value for property taxation based on what I'm calling a stewardship covenant, which is defined in the proposed amendment. So basically, what's been happening is that the minimum requirements of the Shoreline Protection Act have been adjusted for proposed developments. So say an applicant comes and they have a little bit of shoreland and there's a cottage on it. That cottage gets torn down the shoreline gets excavated, a foundation gets built, and these foundations essentially are dams to the subsurface flow. So the whole function and use of the protected shoreland is destroyed, especially on smaller lots where these cottages are. So what this proposal is requesting is that a combination of the already declared public interests to preserve historic structures, to preserve the shoreland, and to preserve the open spaces and wooded, of the current use statute. So the difference here is that this request is to allow the current use of the 250-foot shoreland protected zone to have cottages that are built on posts. So the posts of these cottages do not affect the groundwater and the use of the protected shoreland to buffer the water, which is the whole purpose of the Shoreline Protection Act, is to preserve the shoreline, to preserve the water quality. And so as we have seen, the water quality in New Hampshire is in the news. There's cyanobacteria blooms, there's E. coli problems, there's a lot of, septic system regulations that are being changed. And there's coming up tomorrow are talks on, increasing penalties. I'm not interested in increasing penalties because once the shoreland is gone, it doesn't come back ever. So that's the rationale behind this bill. And then I went through and, wrote up all the amendments for all these different bills. So basically, if we started with the current use bill, we'd have to define it that this was also eligible shoreline, it's just the 250 feet.
We kind of got to stick with the bill that's in front of us.
Well, this is the bill in front of us. Needs to be completely amended.
And so
Because-
I have no problem with you working with Senator Ward
Okay.
on the prime sponsor to make an amendment, but a lot of what you've talked about isn't about maintaining a vegetative buffer.
Exactly. It has not been.
Certainly, I know that a foundation put in certain soils is not going to be a dam for subsurface waters, whereas in other places it would be, So I there's a lot of things that you said that I can't do anything with because they're not in this bill.
Right.
All right, so-
I agree.
Do
This
any
bill
of the
is not.
senators have any additional questions? All right, so what I'm going to do is, we'll set this one aside and let you work with Senator Ward.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I still don't see Al, so we'll mark him off as kind of spoke. And then I'm really having trouble with the last name. It's MM, the initials. No? Okay. Anyone else want to speak that hasn't spoken?
There's another.
Oh, there's another sheet. If you want to speak, sit. If you're on the sheet.
Okay. That's what happens when you.
I guess we have a whole bunch.
on the sheet.
We have a whole bunch of people on the sheet.
I can be brief. Good morning. For the record, Jason Stock, New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association, and I've come today to speak in opposition to this bill. I think we all kind of recognize it doesn't really, I don't think it accomplishes what the intent of the sponsor was. I guess the only thing I would like to stress is that current use is a statewide program, and it is the kind of the cornerstone of open space and land conservation in the state of New Hampshire. And to start creating kind of one-offs on a town-by-town basis is really problematic. When we, here you can have one community could adopt its own ordinance to handle shoreland. Another community could do their own, another ordinance. Third could do nothing. And for us as timberland owners and folks that are very active in the current use program, that's a problem. The beauty of this program, and it's a current use, and it's a program that's really looked highly upon by many other states and conservation entities, is its statewide application, its simplicity. With that, I would conclude my comments, and I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you. Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Norm Bernache. I'm on current use board. I'm not speaking for the current use board. I've been on the current use board for probably 24 years. I've been an assessor in various communities for about 41 years. And I worked on Lake Sunapee for doing the towns of New London, Sunapee, and Newberry for 15 years. And all this does is, if a town would adopt it, would lower assessed values, and administratively following these properties around to determine if the buffer has changed would be a nightmare for the community to have to do that. And I think Jason pointed out very nicely that it's a statewide program, and to start breaking it apart would be, I think, a problem.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Rob Johnson, representing the New Hampshire Farm Bureau as the Federation's policy director. Yeah, we're a federation of New Hampshire 10 county farm bureau organizations consisting of close to 2,000 family farm members and additionally supporters and affiliated businesses. And I'll just say that there's no program in state law that's more important to the work in farms and forest of New Hampshire than the current use program. And that's why we're very mindful of any changes. And all I can address here is the wording that's here. And we're particularly concerned with, well, you know, the term new construction or reconstruction is used. What is that? How is it defined? It's not. No cut vegetated buffer. We understand the value of a vegetated buffer. When you're talking no cut, then that means I can't, selectively cut mercantile timber. I can't manage invasive species and things like that. So I'll leave it at that, and just kind of just to elaborate a little on what's previously been said, that the current use program, it works. It works to keep land open. It works, it's effective, it's simple, and we'd just like to keep those things mindful as you take a look at the bill. Thank you.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you. Sam?
I'm going to withdraw my offer to speak unless anybody's got any questions. I think since we're kind of starting from scratch, I think with the bill's language, if you got any questions, but I think what you see in front of you is probably not going to be.
Senators, do you have any questions of DRA? No? All right. Thank you. Matt?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Matt Leahy. I'm the Public Policy Director for the Forest Society. We are a private nonprofit land trust, so we protect land either by ownership or through holding conservation easements on other private land. We oppose the bill. Forest Society was one of the organizations that advocated for the establishment of current use in New Hampshire back in late 60s, early 1970s. And as Jason mentioned, it is one of the cornerstone laws in our state for preserving open space. And, as we read the bill, and as, Norm and Rob mentioned, it creates a whole lot of confusion. And it, we certainly, sort of in a general sense, if something in the law needs to be improved, we'll look at that. But this bill, again, does not strengthen the current use program, and it has been mentioned, it'll just create a lot of confusion and difficulty in administrating. So again, we oppose the bill.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. That is the last person on the second list. Is there anyone out there who didn't sign up and wishes to speak? Seeing none, you can tell Senator Ward I don't intend to take this up until 2 weeks from today. At that time, I would like to get it back in front of us. The number of people signed up, except for the ones that I've called, there was one additional person, did not indicate whether they support or oppose. And online, there was 1 support and 3 opposed. And we'll close the hearing. And with that, I don't intend to go into executive session today.
Oh, why, Chair?
I think that the ones that I would have done, I could have gotten concurrence on. And we will, just as a reminder, we will be in session next week at 9:30 over in the archives for a briefing with Secretary of State, and then a tour of the facilities over there. And then we will meet back here 2 weeks from today. All right? With that, we are adjourned.